In December 2019, UN officials in Somalia declared an emergency. And the reason was right out of the Old Testament. Locusts.
And we don't call these emergencies lightly. We have to kind of make sure it's going to be an emergency. We can't cry wolf, it's really dangerous.
But Somalia wasn't alone. The emergency declaration there also signified growing trouble across East Africa and in areas as far away as India. Despite increasing equipment and monitoring efforts, the first wave destroyed thousands of hectares of pasture and crops.
Ni kama zitatuharibia kabisa. Tutakaa njaa tu throughout the year mpaka next year mwezi wa 10 ndio tutapanda. This year mwezi wa 10.
Over 50 million people were already facing crisis-level food insecurity, right as another plague was spreading.
We have therefore made the assessment that Covid-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
The COVID-19 pandemic is far from over. And another massive wave of locusts is here. Locust plagues destroy not only land, but livelihoods. 20% of the land on Earth, as well as 1 in 10 people, could be impacted. How is the pandemic affecting what might soon become a plague? And what will finally put a stop to it? First, let's start with the basics. A locust is a type of grasshopper. Only the type of grasshopper that can fly 150 kilometers, that's 3.5 marathons, in a single day. While there are several different species, the one we're concerned with here is the desert locust, or Schistocerca gregaria. The name refers to what occurs when their environment gets too crowded. Their physiology and behavior actually changes. They become gregarious, and gregarious locusts form swarms. A typical desert locust swarm can contain up to 150 million locusts per square kilometer, consuming the same amount of crops in one day as 35,000 people. Swarms need months of favorable conditions and several successive breeding cycles to happen in order to become plagues. But when plagues do happen, they last for years and require hundreds of millions of dollars to bring under control.
Desert locust has one of the best data sets around of any migratory pest in the world because it has the oldest monitoring system.
Examining that data from 1900 onward, plagues often had lengthy cycles. Onsets followed by peaks and declines. That used to be the norm. But after 1960, recessions became the norm. There were even stretches where no swarms were recorded at all. This was due to improved monitoring and control measures. One reason for the current crisis is that in some areas those measures went unimplemented for far too long. If we go back to 2018, we'll find the perfect storm. Cyclones brought heavy rains to the empty quarter of the southern Arabian Peninsula, which allowed 3 generations of breeding to occur, undetected and uncontrolled.
The sizes of these areas are, 4 or 5 times the size of Germany, yeah? So it's really, really hard. Also, you've got conflict, so you can't monitor in areas that are unsafe.
But there's another major factor that's helping swarms to travel and swell.
The biggest problem today is the climate change.
Climate change is also complicating our efforts to predict.
Limiting the growth and migration of desert locusts is much harder this time around due to corona. This has dire consequences for many already on the brink of food shortages. And that's because COVID prevents farmers from offsetting crop losses by doing manual labor in cities, because of curfews, restricted movement, and social distancing mandates. In short, many now have no other means of getting food. COVID measures also impact how locals are trained to eradicate them.
You can't do the traditional training anymore, really. So you have to find kind of new ways to do training at social distancing and using video and, Skype.
But it's that very training, particularly on how to use pesticides, that is the most effective way to stop them. Some unusual alternatives were considered until China ultimately decided against sending ducks to Pakistan to solve the problem, and for good reason.
The traditional methods, like integrated pest management, these work fine in farmers' fields against sedentary pests, seasonal pests that aren't migrating around. But when you have the migration component in a pest, that changes the narrative completely in terms of control options.
Only chemical or biopesticides work. The chemicals are bad for people and the environment in myriad ways, and only one company, Novacrid, makes the biopesticide, which comes from a fungus. But Pakistan does have reason to fear, and the government has been busy preparing. The current swarms are hitting the country from 2 different directions, in parts of India from 3. Control measures are essential, but they can only do so much until the weather dries out, and climate change is making predicting that difficult. Desert locusts also expand 20-fold each generation. Looking at control operations in Africa alone, the locusts are multiplying much faster than the pesticides can keep up. The relationship between locusts and humans is one long continuous story. And unfortunately for us, this particular chapter doesn't appear to be ending anytime soon.